Shifting gears now, economists are sounding alarms about inflation. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development calls it the main risk to the global economy, and the International Monetary Fund warns of intensifying pressure, particularly in the U.S., due to uncertainties caused by the Omicron variant. Up next, we're going to focus on inflation in the U.S. The United States is facing its highest inflation in 30 years. The Consumer Price Index, which measures prices paid by the typical consumer, is up more than 6%. That's the fastest increase since 1990. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that food prices jumped by 5% over the last year, energy up 30%. That means overall inflation has been running well above the Fed's 2% goal for quite a while. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said inflation can no longer be categorized as short-term.
I'm ready to retire the word transitory. I can agree that that hasn't been an apt description of what we're dealing with. I think the pandemic has contributed in very important ways to the inflation problem that we're facing.
Well, some in the U.S. say they're having trouble feeding their families. Higher food prices have added to the challenge this year, and as Hendrix Sabrandi reports from Colorado, food banks are dealing with increased cost as well.
Outside a Denver Human Services office, staffers and volunteers with Food Bank of the Rockies set up a mobile pantry. A wide menu of food items is prepared to be distributed to people in need, some of whom are lined up in their cars already. It promises to be a busy morning here.
So we're going to need 2 people, one right there and one here for traffic.
These boxes are essential for many.
Not having enough money for the holidays to buy food, and actually a lot of things on the shelf that you really need is gone or it's too expensive. So this here helps me.
Higher inflation has driven up food costs significantly across the U.S.
The prices of groceries have completely skyrocketed. It's really insane.
Cost of living is high, gas is high.
Yes.
I don't know. It's a constant struggle. It's very frustrating.
What?
That struggle is now shared by this food provider. 80% of what Food Bank of the Rockies hands out is donated by retailers, manufacturers, and agricultural partners. It pays for the rest.
The amount of money that we are spending on food has more than tripled in the last 2.5 years. We're now spending almost $1 million every single month.
For example, the cost of beef has gone up 27% over the past year. Vegetable oil is up 54%, and canned fruit another 30%. Freight costs for the organization are up 25%, and some temporary U.S. government food commodities are not available. Many food banks are also dealing with supply chain issues. This trend and the need for help escalated when the pandemic hit.
I've never used food assistance, government assistance in my life, and I'm very grateful that it's available. I didn't know it was available, and if it wasn't available, I don't know what I would be doing right now.
I'm a single dad raising 3 girls and 2 boys on my own.
For Ernest Watson and many he knows, it's a daily struggle to get by.
It's ridiculous, even the gas. I mean, California is $5 a gallon. Like, low-income people, how can we afford that? You know, we barely trying to make it on ends meet now. This helps out tremendously.
Food Bank of the Rockies, which says each dollar buys 4 meals, is counting on the public to remain in a giving mood. 40% of its annual revenue comes at year's end.
We're not sure if the inflation that we've seen with food costs are going to maintain, but we're bracing for that.
These folks and others like them are counting on this service for the holidays and beyond. Hendrix Sabrandi, CGTN, Denver.
Well, let's talk about this with William Lee in Washington, D.C. He's the chief economist at the Milken Institute, an economic think tank based in California. It's good to have you with us on the show. So prices are up. A lot of people complaining about this. U.S. inflation rising at its fastest pace in 3 decades. What's going on?
The one problem that everybody at the Milken Global Conference in October agreed on was inflation is a result of the imbalance of supply and demand. COVID has knocked out supply in the sense that the global supply chain is broken and remains broken. Unfortunately, the very stimulative policies of the Federal Reserve and the U.S. fiscal authorities is also pushing up demand, so that right now people really want to spend and have much more income to spend, but there aren't enough goods and services to satisfy that demand. That imbalance is what's contributing to this overall problem. And what we are finding is that the Federal Reserve is recognizing this, and they have already announced we're trying to ease back on the degree of stimulus by more quickly tapering their purchases. But unfortunately, the fiscal authorities continue to have very expansive fiscal policies, massive amounts of promises to people that they're going to get a lot of services in the future, even though we don't have the people and goods to supply them.
Yeah, a lot of people feeling they've got cash to spend and are out there spending it, partly driving up the prices here. So what do you think the White House can do to tackle this crisis?
I think what the White House has got to recognize that it is almost helpless in managing the global supply problem. It can help the domestic supply problem by easing up on the incentives for people to stay out of work. We need more in the way of daycare and help facilities to reassure people that their families are safe if they go back to work, and also they should no longer be paid to stay out of work. Those kind of disincentive policies, I think, have to be put away, and they are slowly going away. One thing the White House is trying to do is to manage that domestic supply problem at the ports by quickening the degree to which the ports are able to process the logistical logjams.
And it's not just the U.S., this is affecting a lot of countries all over the world. Certainly we're seeing high inflation in China as well. Why are other countries also seeing this issue?
Oh, that's a great question, because this is a global supply chain. And one of the things that we learned over this COVID problem in the last 2 years is how extensive the global supply chain is, especially going toward Asia, and how central China is as part of that supply chain. When China shuts down its ports, it not only interrupts the supply chain within Asia, but also it starts to cause problems in resynchronizing. When China reopens, other ports are closed, and that lack of synchronicity makes it almost impossible for the flow of goods and services to continue again. One of the things that we need is coordination of COVID policies and how we address COVID around the world. We cannot have some countries shutting down while others are continuing to be open, and demand is very, very strong because they have vaccination policies as opposed to shutdown policies.
All right. William Lee with the Milken Institute. Great to have you with us. Thanks so much.